Hi everyone, this is Mr. Johnston, and this lesson is going to be on squares and square roots. So the first thing we're going to do today is we're going to find out what is the relationship between perfect squares and square roots. Now, our starting point is going to be figuring out, first of all, what is a perfect square. So a perfect square is the product of a whole number multiplied by itself. An example of this would be a whole number, 5, multiplied by itself. 5 times 5 is 25. So 25 is a perfect square because a whole number multiplied by itself is 25. And this works for every whole number. So another example would be 7. 7 times itself, 7 times 7 is 49. So 49 is a perfect square. So the first thing I'd like you guys to do is go ahead and use this left question area to write all of your perfect squares to 12. And the reason why I want you guys to do this is A, to see all of the perfect squares up to 12, because these are the ones you'll deal with the most, and also just to kind of get to see what numbers are perfect squares, and so that way you can recognize them a little bit easier in the future. So we start at 1, so 1 squared, or 1 times itself, is 1. 2 squared, or 2 times itself, is 4. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 squared, 3 times 3 is 9, and so on all the way down to 12 squared. 12 times 12 is 144. So once you have that, the next thing we need to know is what is a square root. So perfect squares and square roots are basically inversely related. So what I mean by that is that they are opposites. So whenever we're doing 5 times 5 is 25, the square root is going to get us the opposite direction back to where we started, or the 5. So a square root is asking what number multiplied by itself equals that number. So if I was to ask you what is the square root of 5, the square root of 25 is going to be 5, because 5 times itself equals that number. So when we see what a square root, it's going to be written like this, with what is called a radical. Now, most of the time, you're going to see it like this one right here. So it's going to be the check mark with the bar over it. Now, sometimes, especially with technology and online, you're going to see it with just the check mark and not the bar over it. And sometimes it might be just this little itty bitty check mark. That's going to be a little bit more rare, but most of the time it's going to be one of these two over here. So my examples. So first, for a perfect square, 6 squared, or 6 times itself, 6 times 6 is 36. Now, if I asked you what is the square root of 36, so I want to know what number times itself is equal to 36. That is, of course, 6. So what number multiplied by itself equals 36? 6. Another example would be if I asked you what is the square root of 81. So what number multiplied by itself equals 81? And if I look over here at my perfect squares, I see that 9 times itself is 81. So the square root of 81 is 9. Now do notice how I didn't write 9 squared, because those are technically not equal. The square root of 81 is equal to 9. 9 squared equals actual 81.